Welcome to my first impressions video of the 14-inch MacBook Pro M1 Pro for photographers and videographers. So let's jump right in. What's up guys, Project Photography back in the video, and today, a few months ago I upgraded from my 2017 MacBook Pro 13-inch that had 8GB of RAM, had an Intel i5 dual-core chip, and 500GB of storage. Now, that was a fantastic computer for the time, but since then we have gotten an incredible line of M1 chips that have really optimized and changed the way that we use computers. And one of those ways that has changed is how we use it for photo editing and content creation, all those sorts of creative outlets. And for me, I decided that this was the perfect time to upgrade from that 2017 MacBook Pro because the battery on it was just absolutely awful. It was really slow, fans started to heat up a lot, had around 1300 charge cycles, which meant I was actually due for a new battery, but I decided against it and just instead got a new MacBook Pro because I thought these new MacBooks that came out are absolutely insane and I really wanted one for myself. So the MacBook I decided to grab myself was the baseline 14-inch MacBook Pro, which has an M1 Pro chip, 500GB of storage, 16GB of RAM, 14-core GPU, and an 8-core CPU. Now, this computer for me has done so much work since I got it back in June, and I've really enjoyed using it. And yes, it is the base model. I did not upgrade a single thing because for me, I felt like this was perfect for what I needed for my workflow. And my philosophy has always been to fulfill your needs in the cheapest, minimalistic way possible, but still be able to fulfill your needs. And this was the computer I think that was right for me. So in this video, I'm gonna be talking about a few things. First of all, I'm gonna be talking about the ergonomics of me actually using it for photography and content creation. I'm going to talk about the screen because I think that's really important. Performance for photography, performance for content creation. So when I'm talking about content creation, I'm talking about Final Cut Pro. And then we're going to go with the battery life and then finish off with the conclusion. And when I'm making my review, just keep in mind that I'm comparing it a lot to my 2017 MacBook Pro 13-inch. And I'm really attacking this from a photographer / content creator standpoint. My feels, my uses, and just the overall experience of using the laptop. So it might not be your traditional review of a computer because I am a photographer and a content creator, so I'm reviewing it in the way that I see feels like it fits me most best. So let's dive into the ergonomics of using this laptop because for me, this is actually one of the best selling points of using this laptop. It was a huge upgrade over the 2017 MacBook Pro 13-inch for a few reasons. First of all, we got the ports on the side, we got an improved screen, a much denser, thicker chassis, and these are all benefits that I really enjoyed. First off, the dense laptop is actually very nice to me. It's not extremely dense to the point where it's unable to be traveled with. It is very easy to travel with, it's not super heavy, but it does feel nice and well constructed when actually using it. One thing I really love about the keyboard is that the keys are very, very soft and they have lots of travel when you click on it. The scissor switches are definitely an upgrade for me going from butterfly keys. I actually have a separate Magic keyboard because I love the scissor switches so much. So being able to have them on this laptop is really nice. And for me, they just feel incredible. You really enjoy typing with the thing. It's actually really weird to say. It makes you want to actually go on and type with it, which is kind of why I got rid of my Magic keyboard, but I really enjoy the keyboard on this. It really makes the editing experience really easy and seamless because you have to use a lot of the keys when you're actually scrubbing through timelines, editing things, and so on. Now, I know a lot of people actually really like the touch bar, but for me, I was pretty indifferent about it. I didn't really feel like I needed it. I didn't really use it a lot for my photography / content creation, so I just felt like it wasn't a big use for me. So having the actual regular keys on the top is definitely a win for me. And when it comes to the ports, I actually don't really use them all that much. I know we have the inclusion of MagSafe, we have an HDMI port, we also have an SD card slot, but I actually don't even use SD card slots because of my Nikon Z6s. They use XQD / CFast cards, so that's where the USB-C ports come into play. For me, MagSafe is also not really something that I use because I kind of one cable everything with the USB Type-C cable. I feel like it's much more streamlined, much more simple, and you can kind of plug it into any single port and I don't have to feel like I have to plug in this specific area on my laptop. So I know for a lot of photographers and content creators and videographers out there, they're gonna really enjoy these ports because having the HDMI slot, very helpful for connecting to monitors. SD card in particular is going to be very helpful for those content creators and videographers / photographers, and I think having them on this computer definitely makes it just a much more seamless work experience when you're actually using it for your editing needs. But for me personally, I just don't use them, but I think those are definitely a win when it comes to this computer. And the last thing I really want to touch on when it comes to ergonomics is the speakers. I think these are absolutely fantastic speakers. When I'm editing video with it, I think it definitely provides a very warm, rich, and full sound that I personally feel like is pleasing to your ears. I feel like when I'm actually using it for my editing, and just watching back the content that I make, I feel like it's very accurate. I don't feel like, oh yeah, like this is like off key by any chance. So very much like the speakers. I think it's a big point of this MacBook, and this is a very different experience than my previous MacBook that I had, my 2017 13-inch MacBook Pro. So let's jump into the display, because this is something that I very much really enjoyed using. It's my favorite part of my laptop and something that makes you keep on going back and really just wanting to edit photos and videos and so on. So it's an incredible looking display. It's almost a 4K resolution. It's not quite because the dimensions are a little bit off, but you can definitely tell that there's a significant bump in resolution. I really enjoyed the colors pop. It's rich, full. It makes you want to just keep looking at the thing. It's beautiful. One thing that I forgot to mention in the video is that the reason why this screen in particular is extremely important is because when you're editing photos and editing video, you want the monitor to be as color accurate as possible so that you don't feel like you have to not trust the computer and what it says when it comes to the actual colors. You can trust it. You can make sure that the colors are crisp, clean, and they're accurate. That's really what is important when it comes to editing photos and videos. Anyways, back to the video. On top of it, we have 120 hertz, which for me isn't actually huge for photo editing because we're not moving anything around the screen. But when it comes to video editing in 120 hertz, it definitely helps a lot. I mean, you're not gonna be watching your videos back in 120 hertz, but scrubbing through the timeline is extremely fast. It's really clean. You know, when you're actually moving your scroll or your mouse on there, it doesn't feel like there's any lag. 120 hertz on a laptop is actually definite win for me. It definitely doesn't take advantage of it as much as you would with something like a tablet or a phone, but I think it definitely doesn't hurt to have it on here, especially since this is a pro computer. And the last thing is that it is a slightly bigger screen than my 13-inch. You know, it is a 14-inch, so it's gonna be a little bit larger, a little bit bigger than a 13-inch. And the notch at the top of the corner, let's address that. I personally don't feel like it's that big of a deal. I mean, you do get used to it over time. It's not something that I would really worry about. It doesn't cut into any of my workflows or anything, but if you do want to look out for it, it's going to be there, but I personally would not worry about it too much. Now let's jump into the performance for photography. And I think for me, this is obviously the entire reason why I bought a computer, a machine like this, to make my workflow for photography easier, more seamless, makes me, you know, easier on the go and so on. And I think this computer has really shown me that for photography, it's a really good machine. First of all, I just want to give a little bit of context to what I'm using this for. I'm using it with my 25 megapixel files on my Nikon Z6. They're RAW files. I edit everything in RAW. I'll be shooting things like just doing single shot stuff to a little bit of Photoshop work. So this includes Milky Way work, like stacking, also blending photos, and I'm creating HDRs, panoramas, and so on. And also having very large, you know, amounts of photos I have to edit. So that's kind of what the workflow that I use looks like. Yours is obviously gonna be different, but for me personally, these are my experiences. First of all, when loading out Lightroom and Photoshop, they're extremely fast. Because those apps are native to the Apple Silicon ecosystem now, it makes it really easy to just load them up. No sort of Rosetta in between. It's very fast, very seamless, very easy. Love that. It really saves a lot of time, and you don't really think about it too much, but it gets your mind into the workflow much faster and much quicker. When using Lightroom, and this is all compared to my 2017 MacBook Pro, the photos load in extremely fast. I don't have to feel like I'm waiting for anything. I just throw them in, load them, boom, good, ready to go. And that's exactly what I want from a laptop like this. There's no wait time when moving around the screen, when I'm zooming in, looking at fine details. And for me, that's what I like to do because I want to make sure all of my photos are crisp, clear, sharp, and so on. So there's no wait time with that. And I just feel like it was a lot of lag when I was using my 2017. I just feel like I was zooming, I have to wait for it to load and then move to another part of the screen. It's an entire process that you really don't want to feel when you're just doing some quick checks and so on. Another thing I really like is that when I'm making adjustments with the actual MacBook, it's very fast. It's instantaneous, no waiting for anything. It just goes, does its job, and so on. And exporting is also extremely fast. I think every part about this MacBook, when you're using it with Lightroom, is very fast and very easy. On top of it, I like to use HDRs and panoramas, like I said in the video, and it used to take a long time for me to actually load up the HDRs and panoramas in preview and then get on to editing it. It was just an absolute hassle. It took a really long time. I use this mainly a lot for my real estate work, but with the 2022 MacBook Pro, it's very fast, very efficient. And I just feel like I can throw stuff in there, HDR really quickly, see that preview, boom, go on to the next one, and just keep that cycle going. There's not a lot of wait time in between. And it's the same thing with panoramas for me. I think it's really important when it comes to a machine like this. It helps you speed up your workflow, makes things a lot faster, a lot quicker. Now let's talk about Photoshop, because for me, this is not an application that I use a whole lot, but it's one that I use quite a bit for removing subjects from the, foreground, background, stuff that should not be there, but also creating Milky Way photos, as well as, creating the thumbnails for these videos, which I do quite a lot actually with Photoshop. So first of all, like I said, moving around the screen is very fast. Photoshop is a very intensive application, and you want to be able to move around the screen very fast and not to feel like you're waiting for anything. When changing things in Photoshop, like I said, you just don't have to wait. It's instantaneous. And that's where I feel like the 2017 MacBook Pro kind of lagged behind. You know, you would make a change, you wait for it to do the thing, and you go on to move the next thing. It just creates a workflow that is not very clean and not very consistent. It's not very fast at all, and it takes a lot of time and gets you kind of out of your groove when you're editing. Another thing I like too is when I'm actually masking different objects, it's very, very fast. Like when I use the lasso tool to kind of put it around something, select an object, and then I can just mask it right away. It's really nice for me to do that instantaneously without waiting. Another thing I do want to mention is when I'm using Lightroom and Photoshop, the fans do not kick up at all, ever, really. And it's super quiet. I don't feel like there's any heat dissipating from it, which is a really good sign for me. It means that you can handle these tasks extremely fast and extremely easy, which is one thing I really like about having the 16 gigabytes of RAM, first of all, but also the M1 Pro chip inside is absolutely stunning. I mean, coming from an Intel i5 dual core to a M1 Pro MacBook chip is just night and day. So editing photos on this MacBook Pro is extremely easy. I love it. It's really fast, really quick, and I kind of reiterate a lot of the same thing, but for me, the MacBook Pro has really sped up my workflow, has made it a lot easier to get in the groove, and really, at the end of the day, helps me focus on my photography, and I think that's what's really important when considering a machine like this. So now let's jump into performance for content creation, and for me, this was honestly, I wouldn't say it was more important than my photo editing, but this was almost as equally important for me when it came to actually the purchase decision of this MacBook. So I use everything with Final Cut Pro. This is the software I've been using for years. I enjoy the experience with using this on a MacBook. It's extremely fast. When I'm scrubbing through the timeline, it is super fast. Things load up really quickly. I don't have to like to wait for anything. And when I'm cutting down clips and moving them, it's instantaneous. I don't feel like there's any lag in between them. I think having the 120 Hertz refresh display also definitely helps that a lot. Makes it feel like things are happening very fast and very quick, which I really personally love. And when there's playback, there is zero hiccups. And I think this is really sweet because when I put the thing in full screen, I just watch the whole thing through. I can put it in better quality and there is still no skip frames or whatever. And the quality is crisp and clean, like how you normally see it in just a standalone file, which I personally really like. I feel like it makes the whole project really come together. You can just sit back and enjoy what you've created and not to feel like you have to worry about how your computer is going to perform when it comes to actually looking through it. And I will say this, I know my workflow isn't as the most intensive. I'm still using 1080p footage, but I am color grading. I'm doing everything. I have a lot of layers in my timelines. And I just feel like for the editing experience, it was just really clean and really easy. Again, there's no fans really kick up, no overheating issues. It doesn't get hot at all. And I feel like I could just, do my work and not to worry about anything else about the MacBook. Exporting is also very fast. It's not like the most insanely fast thing on earth, but it's very fast. I don't have to feel like I'm waiting for a super long time. For me, overall performance for content creation is definitely an A+. I really enjoyed using this thing for content creation. Now let's jump into the battery life. And I think this is actually the biggest reason why I actually purchased something like this. Now, the battery life is pretty good. It's not necessarily the most amazing thing on earth. I thought it would be better, but then again, I'm using pretty intensive softwares, intensive workflows to use on this MacBook. So it does, have to drain the battery a little more than not. And I also do want to mention that my friend also has the same MacBook Pro. He told me that, going down to 60 Hertz display also does save your battery life. But for me, if I'm buying a MacBook like this, I want to use it to the full advantage. I want that 120 Hertz. So that's up to your discretion, but battery life is pretty good. And the main thing for me is I can get through a full day's work session with this computer and still have battery left over. And that is absolutely massive because before I would have to be essentially stationed to an outlet for me to accomplish anything with my work. It would take easily an hour. And when that battery life gets down to dangerously low levels, the performance starts to drop. And that's just something you don't really want to afford. And also before my MacBook, because it was older, the fans would kick up and be really loud, really obnoxious. And with this, it's really quiet, really easy. I don't get stressed when I'm using this computer. It's very confident, it's very easy. It just sips through battery life. It lets me do my work and gets out of the way of me actually performing the tasks I need to perform. Like I said, the freedom to be able to move around is a huge reason why I absolutely love this MacBook. Being able to go wherever I want, not to feel like to be stationed to a wall, and especially in coffee shops for me, because when I'm editing, and I don't have a desktop setup. This is literally my entire setup and workflow. When I'm going to a coffee shop and stuff, I don't feel like I have to be tied down to an outlet. I can kind of be a little more mobile. So for me, battery life was a huge plus on this computer, something that I really thought was important. Now let's move on to the last part and the conclusion. Now, upgrading to this MacBook has been a tremendous experience. Like, the tone of this video, I feel like has been just absolutely raving off this computer, but I really don't have anything negative to say about this computer because first of all, it was an absolute upgrade over my last MacBook. It gave me a few positive things. It gave me the freedom to move around. It made my experience as a photographer a lot easier. It made my content creation experience a lot easier, seamless, smoother. It really just made me not have to focus on what my computer was doing and let me just focus on the photography. And I think when it comes to gear, any photo gear, whether it be your cameras, your lenses, your editing gear, your lighting, and so on, you want it to be so that the gear that you have gets out of the way and lets you do your photography without having to feel like you have to tinker with things, worry about things, be stressed about things you shouldn't have to be worrying about when you want to be just worrying about your photography. And this computer does that in the last stage of the photography and videography process. It just lets me edit. It lets me envision what I want to envision and create what I want to create. It's also done things like reducing time for my editing, making the workflow more efficient, and overall creating a better editing experience. Now for you, if you are considering a MacBook or something, and you are a photographer, videographer, a creative sort of person that doesn't necessarily need extremely high-end video and photo editing sort of workflows, I think this might be the computer for you. I wouldn't really recommend a MacBook Air, the new one that just came out, the M2, because it doesn't have a fan in it. It doesn't have as good quality, sustained workflow efficiency. So I feel like if you're gonna get something that is for you in the long run, the M1 Pro, MacBook Pro 14-inch might be the laptop for you. And I also would not recommend getting the 13-inch. It's just too close in price point for this, and you just get way better specs, you get way better performance, and so on. So I really love this computer, and I think if you got it, you would really enjoy it as well. The reason why I explain, my workflow with it is because I want you to translate that to your own workflow and think about, is this going to be the right computer for me? How does my workflow look like? How is it going to compare to workflow like mine? And I really just haven't felt like I needed more power in a computer. I think this is all the power that I really need. Overall, this was a fantastic experience. It has made my life as a photographer and videographer and content creator a whole lot easier. And anyways, guys, that is pretty much it for this video. Let me know what you think about this computer down in the comment section down below. Is this something that you would consider getting? And like I said, this is just a baseline version. I don't really feel like I need anything more than it. This is a solid computer. And anyways, guys, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for experiencing the world with me today. Please make sure to rate, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next one.